Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads it must converses the channel. And again, Yasmin at To the
Hello.
Lit House. Hey there.
Hi.
In the house for another Borges. Sundays with Borges. We're doing today an awesome story. And I mean, like most Borges, is it a story? One, and it is so short, 2 pages.
hmm
So if you haven't read it, definitely get it before we totally blow this all out for you. You can read it probably before we get halfway through our video. House of
That's true.
Asterion. So House of Asterion. It starts off very cool. You ready to just get at it? Sweet.
Yes, I am. And this is from the collection The Aleph. I don't know if you mentioned it.
Right. Yeah, we're not in fictions with this one. Yeah, we're in the Aleph, which is a collection after fictions, and very awesome as well.
Yes.
Very powerful stories. So, first line, I know that I'm accused of arrogance and perhaps of misanthropy, and perhaps even of madness. These accusations, which I shall punish in due time, are ludicrous. It's true that I never leave my house, but it's also true that its doors, whose number is infinite, stand open night and day to men and also to animals. Anyone who wishes to enter may do so. So, right then we get this strange picture. It's somebody who is being accused or is being defensive
hmm
and has a house that is infinite. He proclaims it as infinite. And there's always that these footnotes in both of these, in the two times in my translation that it says infinite in relation to the rooms or the house itself,
Oh,
and
mine has
says
one.
actually 14, right?
Mine has one.
At the bottom. Okay. There's
Yeah.
maybe, oh yeah, it's in the text on maybe one page later.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I have
didn't.
that. Like, it's like inserted into the text.
Yeah, where it says 14, but then in
hmm
brackets it says an infinite number of. So 14 and infinite are being used interspersely here. And we come to see that there's 14 areas, rooms, corridors, courtyards. These kind of things are called out, but there's 14 different areas, and then they just repeat
Yeah.
infinitely. So he says. And just that first paragraph there, we get a, a kind of a picture of a victimized person, right?
Yeah. hmm
The society, if he goes outside, he says, he can go outside, he can go outside, but if he does, people look at him mean, they become fearful, they pick up stones against him,
hmm
and it's yeah, the helpless cry of a babe and the crude supplications of the masses were signs that I had been recognized. People prayed, fled, fell prostrate before me. Some climbed up onto the stylobate of the temple of the axes. Others gathered stones. One, I believed, hid in the sea. So you get this, you kind of start feeling sorry for this character.
Yes, absolutely. And the word they used at first, I really liked. It feels like a defense. He's being very defensive of something. But then, if you are to believe what he's saying here, it feels justified that they just treat him this way. But
Right,
yeah, you absolutely begin to feel sorry for him.
right. So and then the second paragraph there, the fact is, I am unique. I'm not interested in what man can publish abroad to other men like the philosopher. I think nothing can be communicated by the art of writing. I have been formed for greatness. I have never grasped for long the difference between one letter and another. A certain generous impatience has prevented me from learning to read. Sometimes I regret that because the days and nights are long. So again, we start feeling sorry for this person in a way just because
hmm
of their own self and who they are, getting a real sense of a person. But there is, a little like arrogance peeking through with that one,
Yeah.
with that
The fact
paragraph,
is that I'm unique and all of that.
right?
Absolutely.
And setting himself apart from other men or
Hmm.
from men. Um, and then the next paragraph here, this is where the
My
kind of
favorite.
red flags went up, and yeah, it's great. On the first read, I was just like, what's going on here? Of course, I don't lack for distractions. Sometimes I run charging like a ram through the halls of stone until I tumble dizzily to the ground. Sometimes I crouch in the shadow of a wellhead or at a corner in one of the corridors and I pretend that I'm being hunted. There are rooftops from which I can hurl myself until I'm bloody. Fun stuff, right?
Right?
I can pretend anytime I want that I'm asleep and lie with my eyes closed and my breathing heavy. Sometimes I actually do fall asleep. And sometimes by the time I open my eyes, the color of the day has changed. But all of these games, the one I like best is pretending that there's another Asterion. And then there's this little, little section where he's talking to the other him, his imaginary
Himself.
friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His imaginary self.
Right. So then I was just kind of thinking, on that read through, I'm like, what kind of games are you playing? This is a kid
Hmm.
in a house with nothing to do, is
Hmm.
what it is, and it's not fun. You might be
I
trying to have fun.
You're trying for sure.
Trying
Yeah, that
hard.
first time that I read it, I also felt, I don't know, I guess I was trying to justify it in my mind, like, okay, maybe he is perceiving it this way, that all these things are fun. But then the second time that I read it more closely, and then it was after I talked to you, and yeah, definitely no, it does not look like
Yeah.
my idea of
Well,
fun.
just working through Borges is there's something to be said just for that because it's so awesome.
Hmm.
It comes out when you just kind of just putting something out there and then trying to talk through it. Always more and more comes out. We're going to get to a pretty cool place in this one, that's for sure. The next paragraph is him talking about how awesome his house is. Even though
Yes.
there's nothing there, this house is awesome because this house is infinite. And
Hmm.
it just goes on and repeats itself. And he can go. He says, that he can go out of the labyrinth and see the temple of the axes and the sea. That sight I did not understand until a night vision revealed to me that there are also 14 brackets an infinite number of seas and temples. Everything exists many times, 14 times. But there are two things in the world that apparently exist but once: on high, the intricate sun, and below, Asterion. Perhaps I have created the stars and the sun and this huge house, and I no longer remember it.
Hmm.
So,
We get a
I
bit
mean,
of an arrogance again, like him
right,
being the center of the world, or his house being the size of the world, and then maybe I created, the sun, and I just
right.
don't recall.
An,
Yeah.
a, a kind of a delusion of grandeur, but
Yes,
also
absolutely.
an ignorance of what the world is,
Hmm.
and even what he's in. We start seeing holes in all of it.
Exactly. Yes.
And then the next thing is very telling. If you know the Greek myth of Asterion, but we're not going to drop the what Asterion is until we get there. Every 9 years, 9 men come into the house so that I can free them from all evil. I mean, what a good guy.
Right.
You know,
The best.
he's the best. I hear their footsteps or their voices far away in the galleries of stone, and I run joyously to find them. The ceremony lasts but a few minutes. One after another, they fall without my ever having to bloody my hands. Where they fall, they remain, and their bodies help distinguish one gallery from another. I do not know how many there have been, but I do know that one of them predicted as he died that someday my Redeemer would come. Since then, there's been no pain for me in this solitude because I know my Redeemer lives. So we got two things there. One is is the description of him uh, releasing these men that have come into his house from all evil,
Mm-hmm.
not killing them, of course not, but they die, and
Yes.
and he just leaves them where they are because they help distinguish one part of the house from another,
Yeah.
and it's just like what.
Mm-hmm.
But then the idea of that there is a redeemer, that he will
Yeah.
be saved in some capacity, in some way. There is somebody who will save him, and
Yeah.
how will he be saved? Well, obviously being released.
From that.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it could be argued be released from the labyrinth, but if the labyrinth is infinite, then being released from life,
Yes,
you know.
exactly.
And so
Um,
then there's another very human uh thing that comes out, right?
yes, absolutely. And reading that, it's easy to believe what he's saying, I think. Um, because we, especially looking at everything else in the story before this part, that he doesn't have the greatest existence. So it makes sense for him to not want to continue living. And
Right.
if you see existence as suffering, then death would absolutely be a release. And if he sees his own existence that way, then it's also easy to see how he would extend that to the people that he's killing. Um, so you could see it as him either trying to justify his actions or him actually believing that he's just doing them a favor because
Right.
of
I saw
existence
that
is suffering.
exactly right. Just
Yeah.
like that too, because that's how, Borges is very preoccupied in his storytelling with justification,
Hmm.
justification of self. His characters are searching for justification of their actions and their being, and even without it being said, that is uh, in the characters that he creates or
Hmm.
appropriates, right?
Hmm.
So this character is searching for justification or giving how he justifies himself
Yes.
in this, and pretty wild. And until then, and even up until this last point here, definitely kind of pulls on your heartstrings a little bit. It's like, it's like we said right before, like I had said right before the live here, that it's like playing on the empathy of the
Hmm.
reader, in a way.
Absolutely.
If my ear could hear every sound in the world, I would hear my Redeemer's footsteps. I hope that he takes me to a place with fewer galleries and fewer doors. What will
Hmm.
my Redeemer be like, I wonder? Will he be a bull or a man? Could he possibly be a bull with the face of a man? Or will he be like me? And then we have the pause, that Borgesian pause before we get the thrust of the end there.
Hmm.
And,
Yes.
just kind of like, wow, it's almost touching, that
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. I agree with that fully. And um, the fact that he says, I hope that he takes me to a place with less galleries and less doors. So no matter what it is, let it not be this, my
Right,
existence right now.
right. Yep. Whatever it is, there's no talk about it. It's just like just something, not this.
Yeah.
Please God.
Mm-hmm.
And then that end. The morning sun shimmered on the bronze sword. Now there was not a trace of blood left on it. Can you believe it, Ariande? Said Theseus. The Minotaur scarcely defended himself. So Asterion is the Greek Minotaur that is in the labyrinth that Theseus slays, and
Mm-hmm.
Theseus goes from man to god, goes from mortal to legend, immortal
Mm-hmm.
in his story. And the Minotaur is an unbelievably powerful monster,
Hmm.
is what it is. But
Yes.
we didn't really feel that through this story, you know?
Right.
Borges is doing some really cool stuff here.
Hmm. Yeah. And we mentioned a few times um, how we feel sorry for him. Um, well, at first I was just trying to understand what he was getting at, but then you brought it up, and I also feel sorry for him. And the fact, so you mentioned the Borgesian pause before the reveal, or the not the reveal, but the shift in perspective that he always does. And what's interesting about the story in particular, I think, that is that with other stories, you'll get the story, and then the shift in perspective is looking at that story in a different way that you hadn't thought of before. But what this story does is that it shows you a side of the Minotaur that you had never seen before. And then
Right,
the shift in perspective, it is bringing you back to the image that you know and the ideas that you already have about the Minotaur before reading the story. So
right,
it's this defamiliarization of who the Minotaur is. And like you said, there's a lot of empathy here in terms of the response from the reader, and seeing the Minotaur as a human, or seeing him as a human, and then realizing that he's the Minotaur. I don't know, creates that sort of really weird thing where you're like, oh, I never thought about the way that he saw things potentially. And
right,
I never thought about not seeing him as a monster and seeing Theseus as not the hero,
right.
you know?
It takes a very uh evil, antisocial uh person, a mind, to actually say something like, yeah, I am a complete monster, or
Hmm.
something like that. Even no matter what you do, there's going to be this justification, there's going to be reasons for you to do something. And we're talking about really, something that is quote unquote evil, like just pure evil. This coupling of man and beast by the queen and a bull to
Hmm.
create the Minotaur. But even just our regular everyday people in our own lives, like myself, I'm gonna just by habit of mind justify my actions if I yell at somebody. You know what I mean? Well,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
you made me mad, or something like that. And there's those kind of things that we justify our negatives, and this is happening in this story over and over. And then
Hmm.
it's so much that it gets to be that question where, which is right? Did the Minotaur, is the
Absolutely.
story that this Minotaur ate and killed all those people that got put into the labyrinth? That's the Greek myth. But
Hmm.
did he really? What if they just stayed there until they starved to death or something, and he left them where they were, and he wasn't trying, he wasn't evil like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
what if it was this kind of thing? Um, there's so many
Yeah.
parts of the myth that are in here that are played differently, like the
Yes.
one who goes and hides in the sea. That is the king that is waiting for Theseus to come back. And the story is in the myth that they forget to change the sail. So when they're
Hmm.
sailing back, the king sees that, and he commits suicide
Hmm.
by throwing himself into the sea. Well, in this, it's just mentioned like that, and that's a different way of like looking at somebody went and hid in the sea from the Minotaur, from Asterion, and instead of how our the Greek myth narrative is playing out, and you're just like,
Yeah, exactly. Like, by hearing um, others' perspectives, we become more empathetic towards their situation, but at the same time, they're unreliable accounts of what their situation is. So that's absolutely true. Yeah.
very cool. It's so cool. Is there any other aspect you want to go into it, because we got 20 minutes on 2 pages of Borges? right here. It's so awesome.
That is true. I think that I said everything I wanted to say.
Cool. Check it out, guys, if you haven't already. If you've sat through it, then we've totally spoiled it for you. But there's probably more to still pull out, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's better when you reread it anyway.
You're right. And you can reread it in 3 or 4 minutes. See you
Absolutely.
later, Yasmin. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye, BookTube.